Here. Okay, so I know we've talked a lot about COVID and different aspects of our business, so we're going to do it again this morning. However, we're going to focus on the people. And this morning, I believe Christine said, you mentioned fatigue, of folks, our staff that are just, some of us have had it, with all the challenges that come with COVID. So we're going to go over what the workplace looks like in the next normal, and what we can think about or what we can have in our minds when we're making those big decisions of, do we work from home, do we work in the office, and all of that in between. I don't have all the answers, I'll just say that right now. So this is more about what can we think about, what's in the news, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen articles about a lot of different things related to staff and their response to COVID. So we'll work through that today together. I just push the arrow.
You just use the to the left, to the right arrow to change the slide layout.
Sorry. So one of the headlines I've seen in the news is COVID has killed the traditional workplace. So I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that is a headline that the media talks about. And we all know we're probably never going back to the good old days, of 2019 and past. And there's a trend where originally the media was calling it the new normal and what that means. But now we're seeing the next normal. And so we're going to kind of talk about that. It captures the often frustrating situation that we find ourselves in when those traditional goalposts that we've relied on in many aspects of the workplace of how we're doing and some goals and performance objectives, a lot of them have changed and gone out the window. And so right now we are literally constantly in a landscape of change. And that can be tiring, it can be frustrating for all of us for different reasons. So that old adage that the only constant is change really drives home at warp speed now. I mean, it's no joke. So what I see is that the underlying topics here and how we deal with staff in the workplace in our next normal is focused on effective leadership and change management from a completely different perspective sometimes, or a more urgent perspective. And so now more than ever, effective people management is key. So here's some of the headlines that I just grabbed that aren't real exciting. And we'll talk about that. So I've worked in HR for over 25 years. And doing that, I've seen a few things. Sometimes I joke when I go home at night, "How's your day, dear?" Well, it's one for my book. I'm not writing a book, but sometimes there's some doozies, and some things that I probably will never forget, and things that have shaped me. And I feel like I'm a pretty flexible person, being in HR, working with people, but then also working on the business side and representing the organization. I believed that when COVID started, we would get through it quicker than 18 months or however long it's going to take. And I believed that we would get back to normal eventually. I also believed because I felt this way, that I was grateful to have a job. You know, being a port worker, we're essential workers for the most part. And so I thought everyone on staff shared the same sentiment. I was happy to have a job. I was happy to come to work every day or work from home, depending on what the order was at the time. And that we would all be grateful and happy and keep working through it. Well, these headlines have shown that that's not necessarily the case. Even the essential workers are filing lawsuits, striking. It's been tough. And from the recruitment challenges that we've had, employees' attitudes, hearing stories about what our employees have gone through. You know, COVID has touched our lives in a variety of ways. Some of it really heartbreaking. I may still be in denial a bit about wanting to go back to everyone work in the office. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, and how, you know, that synergy and the collaboration and building culture is hard to do from a virtual workplace. But we can't deny the headlines either. So what do? How do we move ahead? We have to, you know, we have a bottom line that we have to look at. We have performance goals. How do we do this when this is what's going on? Even that last one, why Christmas could be stuck in a shipping container. I mean, some people think that the shipping industry as a whole might be the Grinch who stole Christmas. I mean, that's truly, because they don't necessarily understand that it's not just the ports, right? We talked about that a little bit yesterday. So what's next? I believe that leadership skills have always been important, but I think we need to take a look at maybe redefining or refocusing some of our efforts to make sure that we have employees, because people are leaving. You know, we've all heard of the great resignation that has happened, which to me is crazy. There's so many jobs out there, but it's not that easy, right? It's not that simple that, you know, people should just go back to work. Doesn't quite work that way. Christine mentioned fatigue with workers. That is a real thing. And then also, you know, in the 18 months, I mean, we've talked about how great it is to be together, to see each other in person. That is what every employee, or most every employee, also needs. And so when people have been working remotely, we need to consider that, you know, those needs of the employee, the social aspect. But, you know, I read that social interaction is completely and irrevocably changed now. I've seen it in our own workplace that a lot of it is due to individual opinions about working remote, not working remote, whether we should social distance or not, mask mandates, vaccination mandates. All of that can be difficult in the workplace because everyone has opinions. And then we have workers with school-age children. I'm one of them. It's hard to know if I'm going to be able to go to work in the morning because I might get an email or a text that says, oh, potential COVID exposure, your child can't go to school for 2 weeks. Ay, ay, ay. So literally every day is a new day. For me personally, I try to just find the silver lining because it can be tough. So our workers, our employees are in constant heightened state of fear or anxiety and uncertainty, previously never seen. We can't deny that. I mean, the last pandemic from 1918 was completely different. Yes, some things were the same, but we have social media now. And so the information, the good and the bad, is all over the place. And sometimes can drive certain mindsets that are maybe right, maybe wrong. And so this all leads to an entirely new and an evolving way to manage people. Gone are the previous examples of typical workplace change like corporate buyout, restructuring, leadership change, or job loss. Yes, that's all still there. But then you add another layer. So this kind of daily, sustained, intense level of uncertainty can be crippling to folks. And the lasting effects are impossible to understand at this time. Employees are on the edge. You might have all seen that from different situations. People are on edge. And they're trying to anticipate the next change, whether it's something they can control or not. Mostly it seems to be things they can't control. And so how can we as leaders in our industry effectively lead our organizations during this kind of mid-COVID time and then in post-COVID time, which I hope is around the corner? So let's discuss the next normal. In addition to focusing on innovation and performance, we also need to focus on our soft skills as leaders. These skills are important now more than ever. And it's important for all of us to be aware of them. You may not be the ones making the decisions of, say, policy on who's going to work from home or not, and maybe you are. So we have to look beyond the bottom line and the performance objectives and also factor in the people. That will help all of us be successful in the next normal. So I've seen a lot of headlines about leading with empathy. What does that mean? What does that look like? So one aspect is to show compassion. Everyone has been changed by the pandemic in different ways. Some have lost loved ones. Others have been dealing with mental health issues. Some are just very lonely from working remotely. Some have financial stressors because maybe a spouse or significant other has lost their job because of the pandemic. And then we have the children that are going back to school after being online for a year and a half. I have a 9-year-old. By the true needs of the organization while engaging people in the hard work of creating solutions together. More collaboration. Okay. Moving on. Have honest conversations. Communicate with your employees what you're doing about different things. It could be the safety of the workplace. It could be things that have changed, policies that are there to support them, whatever it be. Employees need to hear from the leaders now more than ever. They need to feel supported. And I find that, at least for myself, I'm so busy dealing with the COVID cases, and exposure and who's quarantining right now and who's at work and who's not and all of that it's easy to forget, focusing a bit on the employees and what they need. Reject a virtual workplace at your peril. So I've mentioned a little bit about this already, that it's not a secret that I think a majority of employees who worked from home during the pandemic are interested in continuing to do that, even on a maybe part-time basis. It may be difficult for some of our organizations to embrace this for a variety of reasons. But ignoring it or not factoring it in could be at your peril. We may risk losing our talented staff to other organizations that are willing to maybe be more flexible. We're going to see more and more employees striking, resigning, wanting more pay, all of that, to get what they want in the workplace. And the organizations that do not become flexible, resilient, agile, when it comes to this topic, may lose the most. So there needs to be a conscious decision about what your organization wants to do. Whatever that is, decide that, but also look at the risk factors. Are you willing to possibly risk losing some folks? If, say you want to work from the office 100%. And that's okay. I mean, that is a decision, that is, a business decision. But just know what the risk is. Because we're seeing in the news more, and people are, there's turning over. They're leaving for a variety of reasons. So it's just about that conscious decision. And then lastly, it's the keep talking. Leaders need to keep talking to their employees, to each other, as we prepare for the next normal, which we don't know what that is. I would not have guessed that after, or as this hopefully winds down, that people would be striking or unhappy. I thought everyone would be happy to get back to work, and I feel like the opposite is happening. So I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't know what the next challenge is going to be. But we need to somehow think about morale, get a pulse on morale at every level of our staff. We need to over-communicate with our employees to show the organization supports them. Over-communicate the safety precautions that you've taken in the workplace, and be transparent about change. Be aware of burnout and trauma with employees. Communicate to find out how they're truly doing. And this is really like a frontline supervisor all the way up to the leaders here, is understand what your employees are going through. Because it's good to understand it and to have that in mind when you're making these decisions. It's important for our staff to feel that they are part of a community, even the ones that are working remote. Those are maybe the ones that need it the most. So have supervisors work to help them feel part of the port community. Maybe give more positive feedback. Celebrate the wins, even the small ones. Maybe that's not something that your leaders have done in the past. If the employees think that their leaders care about them, they are more apt to care about their jobs. It matters most that they know their leaders care about them. There's a few articles that I literally, after I was done kind of writing my presentation, a few articles that just unsolicited were in my inbox, because I get a lot of HR type articles, and I'm just going to read a couple of the headlines. Empathetic leaders help thwart burnout, drive engagement, and innovation. That's from the California Chamber of Commerce. Beating burnout, HR ideas for 2022 and beyond. That's from the SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management. And supporting a mentally healthy workplace. That's from the law firm Liebert Cassidy Whitmore. So it's all over. It's all over the news in the HR world, and we can't ignore it, And it's something that is no longer kind of over here on the side. And these leadership soft skills, that's important, but over here is what we really need to focus on. It needs to be front and center. And so it's important for all of us to be aware. This is some statistics about what workers say that they can do from home. So I find it's very interesting that of all employed that were surveyed, 62% said they could not work from home, and 38% said they could. So 4 in 10 workers say they can do their jobs from home. So I don't know how that compares to your organizations and what you see. Obviously, Longshore and all of that, they've got to be on site. But your administrative workers, your office workers. So that's just a little snapshot of one survey. So it's important that we support and we expect these skills from our leaders in our organizations. We need to be prepared for the next normal, not knowing what that is. We need to be agile when it comes to our workforce. How do we retain? How do we recruit? Recruiting's tough right now. It's not, it's not easy, yet there's so many unemployed. So that's where I just can't wrap my brain around that. I don't understand. And again, it's not all about the bottom line per se. It's about the people that get you to that bottom line. So it's focusing on what is going on with them. How do we get the job done given all the stressors that they're going through? Leading into the next normal with these leadership skills, considering the people and how to balance their needs within your organization needs to be key. I encourage you all to talk to your HR leaders or other leaders in your organizations about what they're doing related to preparing for the next normal. There's no easy answers, but I'm hoping that these will help spark some thoughts, maybe some different understandings, or just broadening your perspectives so that you can prepare your organizations for the next normal. Any questions? Thank you.
Wait. You know, you touched on the recruitment part of this, and that is so critically tied in to organizational culture. Oh, sorry. And the recruitment part tied into organizational culture. And when we're working with our clients, a lot of ports around the country, the first question candidates ask is, you know, about the leadership, about the culture, whether it's reporting directly to the board or it's reporting to a senior leader. They want to know that it's a great place to work, and they can call the shots now in terms of salary, in terms of remote work, in terms of perks. So it is truly an employee's market right now, and creating the best culture within that organization to attract people is more critical than ever, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough balancing act.
Hi, Katie. Once again, thank you. Quick question, like, 'cause we're in the port industry, on that essential worker, someone's mentioned earlier, like, do you feel from the point of view of a port, when people are like, in my operation, we get like, hey, we're just as important as the doctors and the people on the front line. Have you had any like feeling of emotion with that kind of sense in the organization at the port? And how do you combat that?
And you're saying that they're so important they should get X, Y, and Z?
Correct. Like,
Yeah.
like exactly.
Yeah. You know, at our port administrative staff, I haven't seen that. I think they realize that their jobs are important. More what I've seen is that there are folks that are scared. They're nervous and scared. So kind of the opposite. It might be more of a on the dock thing, where they're feeling maybe a little more entitled because they are important. But I've seen the opposite in some cases, where people don't want to come to work, or they don't want to interact with others, or they don't want to do certain jobs because they might be physically closer to people. And so then it's affecting their role, and that they're not doing certain things. That's been more of what I've seen than maybe the entitlement. But yeah, I could see that too. I mean, literally this has affected everybody in different ways. And some people are in complete denial and think it's a conspiracy. And Cal OSHA, the state OSHA regulations can't boss us around to the opposite, where they're just very scared. And it's a hard one, because I mean, there's some people that just think they're all that in a bag of chips because they're needed.
No, it was like, that was important, because like they want to be heard. That's what I heard on your presentation.
Yep.
The empathy part is like huge right now in our industry.
Yeah, and I think that's the case anytime in HR. One of the things the basic things I've learned is people want to be heard, right? Even if it's not about COVID or whatever it's about. They want to be heard. So then over-communicating, over-listening to what their needs are and trying to find that balance because we all have a job to do, but we can't ignore their concerns or their expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Outside of my port work, I actually work in HR.
Okay.
So I work for NTT Docomo. We have 120,000 coworkers worldwide. I think the part that, and the port community it's in my opinion, it's very small. And so, people know the players, they know who, you guys know each other. It's very different from other industries, but I think it's probably the most stressed out group, I think, if you look through the pandemic. But I think there was a McKinsey article that came out a couple of days ago, and it recognized the total disconnect between employers and employees and how they feel about work. And, even in our company, we've thrown money, we've thrown everything at the wall, and nothing is seeming to stick. And it's really, I think if there was one comment I would make to any leader in any organization, is just be cognizant that you might be wrong about this. And I think you make a good point that we have no idea what the new normal will be. Laszlo Bock, who was the former head of HR for Google, he's the guy that scaled Google from 100 employees to 100,000 over 10 years. He's kind of seen as the bluebird in HR. He's been updating his book, which wrote out the 8 rules around HR that every company should follow, and he's updating it for what's going on right now, because he's just like, this is totally crazy.
Right.
And so, I commend some of the points that you were making around empathy and just really taking a step back and really realizing what that is. Because I think even in our small port in Guam, it's been a struggle. And turnover, in my view, is something I've never seen before in my career. But it's quite interesting, the situation that we're in. And I hope we get out of it soon, because I'm just tired. And, and I'm sure we all are.
We all feel that way.
Yeah, so yeah, I think just as an industry, stick together and lean on each other, because I think that'll be very important as we get through this.
Thank you. And while you were sharing, I don't recall yesterday, but someone was talking about how, our volumes, tonnage, and all of that has just, for a lot of us, has increased during this time. My gosh, with everything that's going on with the pandemic and we're busier, that's a lot of stress, so.
So it just seems like there's been an over-reliance on sort of the old concept of the shooting stars and the shining stars, and that we've really put a lot of reliance on a few people to really sort of pull through the whole weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then within, in particular, government structures, we're stuck within these personnel policies and the union bargaining agreements and all that. And so from management's perspective, there isn't a lot of flexibility in these things, because we've designed systems that are really rigid and not designed for the flexibility. So from a management perspective, I think it's really imperative upon boards and executive directors to go and make changes to these personnel policies that really free up and allow the kind of creative situations that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because we've designed systems that really, you can't do that within these systems. And you have to break down some of those barriers.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to do at the management and the levels as opposed to the union bargaining agreements, where you're really, stuck within these
Mm-hmm.
frameworks that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So have you had to deal with personnel amendments or any of those changes?
At the peak or the really bad part of COVID, we did talk with our unions, and we only have 2, so it's much easier than some of you have, to talk about changing and scheduling or working differently, and that went fine. But then also within all of this, we got a new port director. So that's, just more change. And so with Kirk, we are currently looking at we're doing a classification and compensation study, because there's not a lot of flexibility. There's compression, there's all those things that was already an issue before COVID, but even now, our hands are tied. And it doesn't help us. And so that's one example. that we're currently embarking on now to try to have more flexibility, at least in that arena. So that's the one example I can think of right now that, yeah, that we're looking at. And so. Thank you for everyone's comments.